Shalom Aleichem. Happy to see you all, to meet you all. Anybody who's here, anyone who's listening to us, obviously has a good reason for doing so, and is obviously looking for answers. Looking for answers, looking for guidance, looking for help, inspiration. The title, what they've written here, is the Derech, where all our struggling and healthy children meet. We all share similar needs, let's get to know them the Torah way. We're not going to be discussing therapy today. I'm not going to be discussing so much the practical application of what we're going to discuss. But being that there's so much balagan and so many people out there who are just throwing theories, hashkafas, perceptions, and often making a big mess, so I'd like to take one nukuda and try and bring it out from Chazal. Something Chazal teach us about the nefesh, about people, and if we understand a little bit that Chazal taught us how to look at the nefesh, it will, by default, it will give us the tools to know what's bound to work and what's not going to work. When dealing or having to deal with a troubled teenager, a challenged teenager, the situation is always very dynamic. It's not just we have a kid here who's acting out and we have an agenda, he's got to be back into yeshiva and marry into a Rosh Hashivish family, and that's our goal no matter how. That's a very immature way of looking at things and doesn't work. When you have a challenged child, you've got a very broad dynamic. You've got the child himself, who's obviously not just woken up one morning to say, I'd love to spite my parents, I'd love to really give them a hard time, what can I do? Okay, I'll be Mechal Shabbos, and that will give them a hard time. No kid woke up one morning like that. So this child has obviously gone through a journey and has got to a place where unfortunately he is today. But he's not the only one in the picture. You've got parents, and believe it or not, the parents are also human beings, and the parents are also on a journey, and they're getting triggered their own way. There's obviously something that made this child act out the way he is, and there's something that's going to be the deciding factor as to how the parents are going to react. Are they going to react maturely? Are they going to react immaturely? Are they going to have their own needs in mind? Are they going to be there for the child? You've got the siblings, which is a very major factor here. Number one, there's the fear of, however I'm dealing with this struggling teenager, often bringing in negative influences into the house and strange ideas. How's that going to affect the other siblings? And then even if it doesn't affect them negatively in a ruchnius way, but how's the brother dealing with the fact that they have a brother who's off the derech? You've got the broader family, the uncles, the aunts, the neighbors, you've got rabbonim, you've got the kehillah, the society, the neighborhood, and all these, each and every one of us, whether we're a parent of such a child, guiding such a child, or we are such a child, all those factors exist. It means as parents of kids like that, we have to worry about the neighbors, or maybe we don't have to worry about the neighbors, but we have neighbors to take into account. If you're a neighbor of such a kid, well then you have a neighbor who's got a kid like this. Well that might be mechayev you something as well. Let's say Baruch Hashem, all your kids are doing fine, but your neighbor's kid is not doing well. Well, that's part of your story, and that's something which you have to do something about that. Or maybe not. There's a Gemara. The Gemara says in Eruvin Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph that Rabbi Yochanan entered a yeshiva. It's one of the Tanoim, the early Amoraim. In that yeshiva they had 12 Talmidim. 12 Talmidim all in all. It says he spent 18 days in that yeshiva, and he says, I didn't open my Gemara once, I didn't teach them anything. All I did was got to know the Talmidim. He's talking about Rabbi Yochanan. I got to know the Talmidim. It was clear to him that if I don't get to know my Talmidim, I'm not going to be able to teach them. I'm not going to be able to influence them. That means having kids, or it's not only with kids, it's with anybody. If you want to influence somebody, it's not just about where my goals are and how am I going to get there. It's like I'm going to go straight for it with a bulldozer. You've got to know the nefashos hapoilos. You've got to know who you're dealing with. There was a common phrase going back over 2,000 years ago. And the reason I know it was a common phrase is because the Gemara in 2 places in Shas tells us that people used to say this. The question is what they meant. But people used to say, Omri inchi. They would say, Oy chavrusa, oy misusa. Either I have a chavrusa, a companion, oy misusa. If I don't, then I'm good as dead. Well, what does that mean? So the Gemara in 2 places discusses it in extremely different ways, and Emir Hashem over Shabbos maybe we'll discuss the other Gemara, but I want to focus on one of them today. So the Gemara says in Ba'or Basra, Rashi explains in Ba'or Basra Daf Tezayin, there's a concept called an oihev, often translated as a friend, somebody one loves. See, it's difficult. The word avo, which we're going to be discussing today, the question is, what does ava mean? What does ava mean? I know that in spoken English, it's something you fall into. In Yiddishkeit, you don't fall into anything. In Yiddishkeit, you grow. In Yiddishkeit, you build. If you fall into something, you're failed. So if like love is something you fall into, then you miss the point. You miss the boat. So what is it? Is love something we feel? Is love something we do? Is love something we are? Is it a state? Is it a consequent? Is it a requirement? Like, what is it? The whole world's talking about it, and there's not very many people who actually know what it means. So we know the Mishnah tells us in Avos in Perek Hey that one of the unique properties of Ava is that it's ein not tluya b'davar. It's totally not dependent on anything, which means whatever you do, it won't be enough to dissolve it. Well, how many of those do we know? The Gemara says in Brachas Samach Aleph that the concept of Ava, referring to the Rebbeinu Shleilim, v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol moedecha. And the Gemara there says, afilu noitel es nafshecha. Even if showing love to Hashem, v'ahavta es Hashem, requires that you don't survive, requires Mesiras Nefesh, then that's what you have to do. Now, there's no mitzvah in the Torah that's mechayev you, that's mechayev us to be Moshe Nefesh. It says v'chayim. There's nothing that you do that is more important than who you are. If there's anything that you do that the consequence is going to be that I am no longer, then you don't do it, because you are more important than what you do. When it comes to v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, that stops being the case. It's obviously not something you do. V'ahavta es Hashem is obviously not purely a mitzvah. It's beyond that. There's obviously something about dying that is not as strong as the love for Hashem. In other words, we'll understand this in a few minutes a bit better, but death is not going to get in the way of the Avos Hashem. Death is a temporary state. It's a state that temporarily we move into consequent to a mitzvah called Avos Hashem. But at the end of the day, what's going to survive is the Ava, to the extent that it's this Ava which is the Sibba, which is the Machayev of Tchias HaMesim. Somebody who's got no shaykhs to what we call Ava is not going to wake up for Tchias HaMesim. That's what people would say, Oy chavrusa, oy misusa. What do you mean, oy chavrusa, oy misusa? So the Pshat means, if I don't have a companion, I don't have a friend, I don't have somebody to love, I'm as good as dead. It's much deeper than that. If you know what the sugya called chavrusa means, if you know what love means, then misa is never going to get to you. Yeah, after 120, we might enter a temporary state called misa, until Tchias HaMesim. If we are void, if we don't have the Ava, then there's no Tchias HaMesim. It's a Mefurush in the Gemara. So we know that in Chazal, when two people want to make a covenant, a bond, what's it called in the Torah? A bris. A bris is a covenant. David made a bris with Yonasan. There was the bris bein absarim. Now, if anyone would ask you, what ingredient, what factor do I need to merge, to bond, to combine two things? What do I need? So I'm not sure if I would have an intelligent answer, but I know the one thing that I would not use. The only one thing I wouldn't use is a knife. I might use glue, I might use water bonds things, I could use maybe wind, to put things together. I would not use a knife. That's the one tool which the Gemara says explicitly, that you're not allowed to put a knife on the mizbeach, because knife cuts people away from life. So if you want to make a bris with somebody, the only thing you don't use is a knife. Now, the problem with that is that there's only one thing that the Torah tells us about making a bris, and that is that you do it with a knife. It's called koires habris. You cut a bris. The first bris mentioned in the Torah explicitly was the bris bein absarim, with Avraham Avinu. How did he do that? He took the animals and he cut them into two. What a way of making a bris. We have the bris milah, the famous bris milah, which is some type of connection between the child and his neshama, between the child and Hashem, which is not, we're not going to discuss that sugya at length now, but how do you do that? By being koires habris, by using a knife. So the Vilna Gaon asked the question. The Vilna Gaon in his Pirush and Sefer Yetzirah, he says, I don't understand how you can make a bris with a knife. I'm going to read you the words of the Gaon. I'll read it to you and I'll translate it. V'oimer l'cho, says the Gaon, I'll explain to you. Mahu inyan bris. If you have somebody you love like you love yourself, and you want that this friend should never be separated from you, but you can't, it's just technically not possible to always be hand in hand. Right? If I want to always stay connected to you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of me and I'm going to give it to you. Now, since I'm always connected to myself, because I am I, if I give a piece of me to you, then wherever you are, part of me is gone with you. That's something that was once me and is now with you, that guarantees that we're always going to be connected. Etc. V'loshen bris u'avtocha, it's a guarantee she'al yedei hadavar vaday lo yispared. It's guaranteed there's not going to be any separation. V'zehu inyan loshen krisa. That's why we use the lotion of severing, of cutting. Shekoires mimenu hadavu kloi v'nosein loi. That's the Vilna Gaon, how he explains what is a bris. A bris means that there's some understanding, some recognition that you and I, at this point in time, you and I share the same entity. We're part of the same being. So Ava is not something you do. You might have to do something to create or to awaken that love. But it's not something per se just an act. It's not even something necessarily that you feel. You have to feel it, you don't feel it, that's not the determining factor here. It's something you are. And it's eino tluya b'davar, right? It doesn't make a difference what you do. Even if you become my biggest enemy, you're still part of who I am, because part of me is with you. Nothing can get in the way. A slave, an eved, right? He only keeps his title as a slave all the while that he's not rebelling against his master. If a slave wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm not doing what you asked me to do, then you're sacked, you're not a slave anymore. A child, bonim, being a child is not something that's determined by what they do. A child who can rebel against his parents is still a child. Still a child. It's interesting, the Gemara said, the Pasuk says in Parashas Re'eh, that bonim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. We're all sons of Hashem, And the Pasuk says, and so what? And therefore, when somebody loses a relative, don't mourn too much. What's the association between those two things? There's one thing, bonim atem l'Hashem. There's another thing, when you're mourning, make sure that you stay within the halachic boundaries. There's different halachas of what you're not allowed to do when you're mourning. Keep the mourning with its limitations. And the answer is that if we are bonim l'Hashem, what does that mean? It means there's something about me and something about Hashem that has merged into one. When it says in the Pasuk that Hashem blew a neshama into my guf, vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim, then there's something in me which is coming from Hashem. Now we don't need to understand that, we're not discussing Kabbalah now, it's deep concepts, but there's something in me which is a chelek elukah mimal, there's some godliness in me. Now there's also some godliness in you, in each and every one of us. Now, there's only one thing that can't be cut into two, and that's godliness. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hashem is one. So if there's godliness in me and godliness in you, the two of us must be connected by default. If we're not connected, it's either the only way we're not connected is either that I don't have godliness, or you don't have godliness, or that godliness can be cut into two. And since all those three are false, by default we're connected. The Gemara says in Kiddushin, Daf Lamed Vav, the Gemara says there's a machlekes about the Rishonim. The Reb Meir said, Bein kach ubein kach bonaim haim. Klal Yisrael, irrespective of what their situation is, they're always bonim to Hashem. The Rashba says that even though normally the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, and in the Gemara there, Rabbi Yehuda has a slightly different approach, but the Rashba says in this case the halacha is like Reb Meir. It's almost one of the only places in Shas we paskin like Reb Meir, bein kach ubein kach bonaim haim. So where's this taking us? There's a Gemara says in Sanhedrin that Yisrael shechota, when Klal Yisrael, when the Yid does an Aveira, Yisrael, afal pi shechota, Yisraelhu. Even though he did an Aveira, he's still called a Yisrael. Everybody knows this famous phrase, afal pi shechota, Yisraelhu. I would have written it the other way around. Afal pi Yisraelhu, even though he's Yisrael, he's a Yid, he's a Jew, chotahu, he's a chayta. He deserves to be punished. Maybe if he wouldn't be a Jew, Shain, who cares what he does? But you did an Aveira. We know that at Har Sinai, we all made the Shvuah, we made the promise we're going to be tzaddikim. Mushba v'oimed me'Har Sinai. The Gemara in Niddah Daf Lamed says, before each and every one of us was born, we made the Shvuah that we're going to be tzaddikim. So I would have thought it should say, Afal pi Yisrael, who even though he's Yisrael, chota is a chayta. The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara says, Afal pi chota Yisrael. So how are we supposed to understand that? He's a Yid, he did an Aveira. Even though he did an Aveira, he's still a Yisrael. What's the other tzad? What's the lafuke what? In contrast to what? That even though he did an Aveira, he's not a Yid? So it's clear in the Gemara, at least the maskana of the Gemara, is that there's something which is beyond chet, which is way transcends chet, and that's the fact that you're Yisrael. Now being a Yisrael, it's innate, it's something you were born with, something you were born as. So afal pi shechota, you can do all the Averos in the world, there's one thing that you're not going to manage to destroy, and that's the fact that you're born a Yisrael. And the Gemara says, don't think that because you've done so many Averos, you're now something else. Afal pi shechota, no. The Nakuda called Yisrael, that stayed. And that's the Nakuda of Bonim Atem. That's the Nakuda of Bonim. Somebody who feels completely disconnected, whether it's disconnected from themselves, disconnected from their spouses, disconnected from their children, their parents, from Hashem, they've lost this vital ingredient called connection. Nothing exists if it's not connected. The Gemara says in Baba Basra, everything in the world is only half. Everything is half. You're always dependent on somebody or something else. There's a man and a woman. It's a zachar and a keva. There's always, one is dependent on the other. There's day and night. The Gemara even says that the day lends time to the night and the night lends time to the day. There's always the plus and the minus. Everything is dependent. Anything that stands on its own, standalone, has no schus kiyum. That's why when you count people, right, we know that if you count somebody 1, 2, 3, 4, it's very, very dangerous. It says there can be a magefa. Because if each one is just one, then we're in trouble. So what do? We take the machzis hashekel, where everybody is part of a whole, where everybody is the other half of somebody else, and then it's okay. Then you have a schus kiyum. Because what makes all of us part is the fact there's a one Beira, there's one Hashem that's connecting all of us, and that's the part that no chet can get in the way, and no misa can get in the way. Even death can't get in the way. That's why there's no magefa. The Maral says there's one mitzvah that somebody who transgresses that mitzvah is not going to wake up for Tchias HaMesim, and that's somebody who lends money and takes ribis. Somebody who takes ribis. Ribis happens to be the same letters as bris. When you're taking ribis, what does that mean? It means I don't need you, you don't need me. I'm going to use you and you're going to use me. Right? He didn't understand as if I have to lend you money because we need each other. We're there for each other. If I lend you money and I make it into a business, it means that you're there to serve me. That's how the Maral explains. He's got a whole parak in the Sivat Tzedakah, where he says that somebody who lends with ribis, he doesn't understand how each and every one of us are two halves of a single being, and therefore he's not going to stand up for Tchias HaMesim. Well, many of our kids, or kips for those who know the term, the kids in pain, what most of them, if not all of them, are going through, if you ask them, does anyone love you? And I do this all the time with parents, with the teenagers that I speak to. I say, if you were Hashem who had to grade you, how much do you think Hashem loves you? I'll get something between minus 50 and plus 10. Right? That's like the average. If he tells me, no, I get an 80, I know he's in denial. If you're an 80, then why are you an off the Derech kid? They're living in an existence where there's nobody who loves me, and they'll even give you good reasons. They have plenty of references. He'll tell me, he'll explain to me why it makes sense that Hashem doesn't love him. And he's, like daily, he's counting. Unfortunately, it starts off, or often it starts off with a mistake. I once had a Bach who came to me, he even ate on Yom Kippur, he was keeping nothing. And I asked him, what made you drop everything? So he said to me, I was no good. I was finished. Long before I ate on Yom Kippur, there was nothing right about me. So I said, whoa, let's hear what Averis you did that was even worse than, tell me about how bad you were. Well, what's the worst thing you did? He says, for years and years, I couldn't keep myself back, and I only waited 5.25 hours after meat before having my coffee. And he was sure that was a terrible Avera. And then after 5 years and doing this every day, how many days? Thousands of days, every day having a coffee, we're not waiting the full 6 hours. So that was it. There's nothing left of my Yiddishkeit. So it started with feeling rejected. He felt Hashem's obviously rejecting me. Hashem rejects me, I'm a reject. If I'm a reject, then that's it. Nothing doing. We have to realize exactly the amount that we feel that our kids are part of us, in spite of the fact that they might be doing terrible things. That's exactly what he feels about himself. There's somebody I know now at Israel who once did a survey. He had hundreds of people in the room, and he gave them a form, and he told them to write there, to give a score of how much you feel Hashem loves you. Okay, fine, he gave in the papers. And a little bit later in the evening, he gave them papers and says, now I just want you to write down how much do you think your parents loved you. He said in almost 100% of the cases, the numbers were identical. If we feel that my parents are crazy over me, it doesn't matter what I did. I came in at 3 in the morning, and we're not discussing now how to deal with a specific crisis. I don't want to do that now, because I don't know your cases, every case is different. I'm just taking the general rule. Right? If your kid has like really tested all, he's pushed all the buttons, he's broken all the boundaries, and he knows you're there for him, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. He knows I'm well anchored. My parents are there for me. If my parents are there for me, Hashem's going to be there for me. So today I have a challenge in one area or another, he'll get through it. If he feels rejected, he feels I have no schus, that somebody should want me to be connected to them, or they to be connected to me, we've robbed them of the most important ingredient in their lives. How many parents have I heard saying, yeah, I told my child that if he does this and this, no one's going to want to marry you, no one's going to want to be your friend. Have we ever said that to our kids? What do you mean, if you go to shul like without wearing your hat, who's going to want to deal with your shidduchim? I've had parents who tell that to little kids, 5-year-old kids, if you don't go on diet, no one's going to want to ever marry you. 5-year-old kid, I had a mother who said that to her. And looking down the line, 15 years later, we understand exactly the way we understand the full picture. It's so important that we give over this message to the kids. Who you are is far more important than what you do. The children who feel that the religion is what's causing them rejection, because I just can't do it right, I can't daven straight enough, I can't put my finger in the siddur every minute, I can't come in time every time, I can't make my brachas loud enough and slow enough and clear enough. And if religion becomes all the conditions on which the love, the ava is dependent on, if the only interactions a child gets from their parents is, this is not good enough, and this is not good enough, and this is not good enough, he's going to say, you know what, I've got a brilliant idea. I'm just going to go off the derech, and that's it. Now there's no more conditions. I don't need to keep anything. I don't believe in anything. So going off the derech has become his solution, not his problem. And who created that? I don't blame parents, because I really don't think that parents are the cause for children going off the derech, but that's not for now. But whoever it was that convinced this kid, you don't deserve to be accepted, even though you're not managing to conform on a 100% level, those are the people who have planted those seeds of, I'm going to get rid of anything to do with conditions. Why are they breaking every rule? Because a rule just means that you'll only love me because I kept the rule. And they don't want that. They want the connection which is totally eino tluya b'davar. And they will get rid of every davar just in order to find the love they need, which is eino tluya b'davar. And unfortunately, maybe fortunately for them, but unfortunately for us, and nowadays there's an amazing platform where love is served without any conditions. 20 years ago it was the streets, today it's the internet, and it's amazing. You get everything you need there. It's all fake, right? We know that there's no substance to it. But these kids, they're finding the love and nobody makes any conditions. All you need to do is I accept, which is something Google asks from you, or I don't know which platform, just I accept. There's some conditions and nobody reads them. Beyond that point, everything goes. There's another point which is very important. So we discussed a little bit the child, right? So the teenager who got like this warped understanding or the feeling of like, I'm not good enough if I don't conform. What about us as parents? How often are we projecting our own feelings of rejection onto the child? So it's true that today we're all well-built adults who think that everything's, we think that we're all okay. And most of us are okay. But the Gemara says in Moed Katan that a 60-year-old person has inside of him a 6-year-old child. Now that 6-year-old child is till today 6 years old. Which means that if at 6 years old, any of us adults, right, got that impression from a teacher, from a parent, from a friend, that you're not good enough because there's something you did that didn't conform with some rule or other, then if we don't work that, do the inner child work, if we don't take care of that, then till today, we can be 60 years old and beyond, and will still be something inside of us that says, does Hashem really love me? Am I deserving of really being loved by all the people around us, our spouses, our families, by Hashem. Now what happens, why is that relevant to here? Because what happens when our kid, or Kip, our challenged teenager, comes home with his earrings, with the yellow hair, or anything else that they choose, and what happens, so obviously, there's how do we relate to the kid? But what's the kid done to us? When this kid comes in, the parent says, I can't see him like that. And then we ask them, what exactly can't you see? What do you mean it's an Aveira? And then we feel like saying, okay, pull the other one. It's like, is that really what's going on here? And then I asked parents this. I said, if this kid was holding a big banner that said on it, I'm off the Derech, and it says that you are ... what would it be? And many, many parents say, a reject. What do you mean? If my child is off the Derech, it means that I am not deserving of being accepted by whoever I need to be accepted. My parents won't accept me. Well, if they knew that my child was off the Derech, they would disown me. Well, Hashem definitely hates me because my child is doing an Aveira. And then all our own issues of rejection are being triggered here. And then we're in turn trying to protect what we call love and being deserving of love. And then we try with all our goodness to tell our teenagers that, if you do this wrong, no one's going to love you. And what's happening here? We're hurting the kids, and the way we're doing it, and the reason we're doing it is just because he triggered our own rejection. Now what happens with all of us kids? Right, I'm talking about the 6-year-old kids. So for those of us who are doctors, therapists, whatever it might be, there's something in refuah called RAS. Right? In English it's the Reticular activating system. Sounds very complicated, but what is it? It's very straightforward. Each and every one of us, we see thousands and thousands of details at every moment. We see color, the sound, the smell, there's what people tell us. We're seeing a tremendous amount of information. If our brains would take in all that information, then the system would crash. Our brains are not capable of taking it all in. So Hashem created a filter between our eyes and our brains called RAS. It's something it's a physical thing, which filters. It filters what we pay attention to. These people who always notice the black cars, the new cars, and the bochrim who always know who's got a new tie, and different people who are always noticing certain things and not noticing other things. That's because in their world they're filtering and focusing on what they choose to focus on. It's a Gemara. The Gemara says in Shavuos, for the Talmidei Chachomim here, Milsa deloi ramya anafshei v'lav adatei. Right? If you were at a scene of crime, but you weren't paying attention, and you come to Beis Din and say, I saw something happened, and Beis Din asks you, were you paying attention to this detail, or do you just seem to remember this detail? And he says, no, I wasn't paying attention. The Beis Din they won't accept the edus. The testimony will fail. So many of us, and it's even more pertinent with these kids, right? Since they are living a life of rejection, their whole, what we call the love tank, right? The need to be loved without any conditions is completely broken and dented by all sorts of different people or circumstances, which again will be discussed over the weekend, not now, about the different traumas and what causes these kids to break. But if their tank is their love tank, we'll call it, and the reason I'm specifying that is because there are other tanks which are equally important, but we're going to stay focused now. So if this love tank is dented, and the love tank is half empty, every time this kid does something wrong, another little bit of the amount he feels he's deserving of love is leaving the tank. And the parents say, what do you mean I showered him with so much love? But yes, I'm sorry, but the tank is dented, there's a hole in it. So we have to learn how to fix those tanks, and Baruch Hashem, one can fix them. If you get the right guidance, you will fix them. But all of us parents and these kids, because we feel we are so rejected, we're walking around all the time thinking, are they loving me? Are they rejecting me? Are they judging me? Are they not? Right? That's all they're seeing. That means you could be giving them a compliment, but if they think that you're only giving them a compliment because they did something that fits your agenda, they'll just chuck it out. Because they're super sensitive to that means their RAS, their system is super sensitive of, is this pure love, is this rejection? There was this story, which I hope never happened, of this rabbi who's, rabbi of a community, and one of the things that every rabbi has to do is he sometimes has to be there with people when they are through their transition to the next world. So he suddenly got a call from one of his community members that somebody is on the 9th floor, and it sounds like he's it's hitting the end, and he wants the rabbi to come. Okay, so the rabbi comes and does what he has to do, and Baruch Hashem, I've never been in that situation. I don't know what rabbis do in those situations, but he was there. And so this person had trouble breathing, and this fellow asked the rabbi, he went to him like this. The rabbi thought, he can't speak, maybe he wants a paper, he's going to write down, his last words. So the rabbi gave him a pen, a paper, he wrote something down, folded the paper, the rabbi took it, put it in his pocket, and obviously 5 or 6 minutes later, the machines went 0, 0, 0, and that was it. Okay, fine. A few hours later, this rabbi's next job, he has to speak at the Levaya. Okay, so he gets up, and in the middle of his Joshua, he suddenly remembers that he's got this piece of paper. Now, this is major. This is what he wrote just before he passed away. This is going to make a good hesped. He takes out the paper, he reads it out. Rabbi, you're standing on the oxygen pipe. And it's unfortunate, but it happens so often where we're so busy doing the right thing, just trying, we have an agenda, we're trying to give a message over, you've got to keep Shabbos, and you've got to do this, you've got to do this, and we don't realize that we're stepping on their oxygen. What's it good for? So a doctor came out and said, the operation successful, the patient died. We don't want successful operations, we want live patients. Live patients become happy patients. Happy patients become healthy ones. And healthy ones, they do everything Hashem wants them to do. So let's try and take that with us. Nowadays, the world is all about contacts, likes, friends, followers. Anyone who's under the age of 25 here knows what I'm talking about. It's all about connection. Make sure that we give our kids that feeling of, we are one with you. We're with you. We're okay with who you are, just the way you are. If they do good things, of course you compliment them. Depending on the situation, we're not giving specific guidance now, but build them. Compliment when they're doing good things, but make sure that they don't have any reason to believe that they're only good and only accepted because of the good things they're doing. Because that's going to give them a warped picture. Remember that when we do things that Hashem doesn't want, Hashem says, Bein kach ubein kach bonaihim. The Rebbeinu Shem keeps us no matter what. Make sure we do the same to our kids, and in Mitzvah Hashem they'll all get stronger, they'll feel they're worthy of something, of themselves, and they'll become Ovdei Hashem the way we all want them to.